Hello, Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, we learned from the recent street flooding activity that no matter how well the city's pumps work, they are not as effective if the catch basins are covered with debris and if the pipes inside are clogged. We'll look tonight at what, if anything, can be done. This year is the 50th anniversary of a monumental decision to block a riverfront expressway. We'll look at the politics and the activists. 4 police officers lost their jobs last week because of their handling of a high-speed chase. The decision was another example of the delicate issues of criminal pursuit. Our Future Watch segment updates the latest on the airport. We will also look at some new activity on South Rampart Street and the preservation of the city's jazz heritage. In the number for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Dominic Massa, Special Projects reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. All right, we're going to go over to Mike first and talk about something that is concern to everybody, and that's flooding in the streets, particularly in the city of New Orleans. Catch basins need to be clear and free for the water to flow into them, and that's still a problem with the catch basins.
Right, obviously we wish we weren't talking about it, but we had on July 10th a freak rainstorm. It was ahead of Barry, Hurricane Barry, briefly, that dropped very little rain, but in advance of that, there was a heavy rainstorm that persisted. In some areas, dropped up to 8 inches in about a 3-hour span, and it led to widespread flooding in many different places in the city, and we heard many people tell us that it was flooding in areas that had never flooded before. So when we had an opportunity to talk to the Sewage and Water Board, which is responsible for the main, the major canals, pumping stations. They said they were operating at near full capacity, and that the pumps and that part of the drainage system was not the issue. Well, there's the front end of the system where the water gets to the canals and pumps, and that's the 72,000 catch basins all around the city. We know that that's a ongoing issue. Those clog with leaves and debris, and there's supposedly a schedule for cleaning and maintaining them, but it goes deeper than that. And I did a couple stories actually that show that even if the concerned neighbors on a block clear the leaves and debris from the front of a catch basin, if you open that drain lid, look underneath, it could still be clogged with mud, construction material, even tree roots that have grown inside. Even deeper than that, the lateral pipes that connect that catch basin to water mains in the middle of the street can be broken. This is, in some cases, 100-year-old infrastructure. And those are problems that clearly are a factor. We don't know the extent to which they're a factor, but areas that, where people said that they have not experienced this level of flooding, it's a concern. The council took it up at a Department of Public Works committee meeting. The mayor also concerned. The Department of Public Works would be the agency responsible for the catch basin lateral.
So it's not the Sewage and Water Board's
Correct.
Responsibility to clear out those drains.
Right.
It's the city.
Exactly, and so there was certainly talk of this being one of those 1 in 100-year storms, but we've now had 3 of those 1 in 100-year storms in the space of a couple of years.
In short order, yeah.
Starting with.
So we're good for the next 300 years.
Well,
We would hope so.
I think they might have to adjust what is a 100-year storm now. Clearly, if something's happening 3 times in 3 years, I don't think you can call it 1 in 100 years
From what I recall,
anymore.
from one of those earlier 100-year storms that we had within the past 2 years, there was an effort, and I think this was maybe even the Landrieu administration,
Right,
to go out and clear all of those catch basins.
That's right. It was August 5th, 2017, and that's what first brought this, I guess, to major public attention. WWL-TV did a major investigative series called Down the Drain. And we looked at, aside from the many, many issues saddling the Sewage and Water Board, and those problems were extreme, many of those have actually been fixed. There's enough energy to run all of the pumping stations. Pumps that were out, most have been fixed. They're up to almost full capacity.
But
so
it's
now
really,
we look
you got to get under the ground
That's
and
right.
see what's going on.
So now we have to look at other culprits. Process of elimination. Okay, your canals, pumps, power, and enough manpower to run all of those things are fixed, and we still flood. then you got to look to other areas like the catch basins.
So that's
Now-
sort of like the first step, and
Now-
everything else is these catch basins
Right.
catching the water literally and
Now,
bringing it to the pumping
As
system.
you said, there was an emergency contract to clean as many of those
Right.
catch basins as possible, and we see that that was, I guess, a sort of a one-time effort because the pace of cleaning those has slowed dramatically. 8,000 of those since Mayor Cantrell took office out of 72,000. That's,
So this needs to step up. So people are actually taking it into their own hands. I mean, literally some folks are going in there and manually clearing it out, but they're hiring professionals to do it themselves.
Well, that's something that I found, and I was a little surprised by the extent of it, that you can hire private drain cleaners for a fee, and a lot of businesses and apartment complex owners actually hire a private company because they're not
Cheaper
going
than paying the insurance deductible.
Exactly. Better than flooding.
And they actually lift it up and go down there and see if something's broken and clear out the clogged
All the things
pipe
that the
underneath.
contractors or the city would do with the
Yeah.
major, vacuum pumps, the pressurized hoses that can snake through, the lateral pipes, all the way to the water mains in the middle of the street. It's quite extensive, and it also, after driving around with one of those crews, realized the extent of the problems the city is facing.
And it's important, so it's something that the city really needs to continue to stay
And
on
the
top
city has,
of.
and the city Department of Public Works vowed to the council that they would be stepping up those efforts. One of the problems is that some of the vacuum trucks owned by the city are out of repair now and waiting to get fixed. There's always some
Okay.
issue or
All right,
another.
so to stay up,
And how many catch basins are there?
72,000.
72,000.
72,000.
Right.
So there's a lot to tend to. So
A lot.
anyway, the bottom line is look out for your catch
And it's
basins.
a high
Don't-
priority. People don't want to flood. You can't live in a city that you continually having your car or worse, house or
I mean,
business
we are
flood.
New Orleans, so we can flood, that's for sure. Dominic, I'm going to go over to you right now. Thanks a lot, Mike. You're going to be talking to us about 50 years ago today was the
This month.
cancel
This month.
this month. This month, 50 years ago, certainly this year, cancellation of the proposed elevated Riverfront Expressway. Dom's going to tell us about it because if you don't know about it, you're going to sit back and go, how did they ever think of doing this in the first place?
That's what occurs to me when looking back on this. Two things about it that are monumental. One, what an awful idea. And two, how monumental that it died.
Yeah.
And when we
It
talk about
was.
it in a minute, how it died, that's also monumental, that the forces that came together that helped stop it. We have some visuals to show as well. Just when you see, with your own eyes, some of there's a map that shows
There you go.
what it would have been. The route would have taken it right along, would have gone from Legion Fields down Esplanade, right along the riverfront.
That's that dark, thicker line is
Correct.
showing the route.
Right through the View Carré,
And then
right in front of Jackson Square.
Right
and
in
would
front of
have-
Jackson Square, right there at the river. Let's take a look at the next image.
This is, again, there were lots of models, and this is another drawing of it. But again, this is looking from Jackson Square,
Right.
from the cathedral. This would have been the view.
That's what you would be seeing if this
Above
project had
Decatur
gone
Street.
through.
Correct.
Right.
So, and then this is an example of what helped stop it. There were a large group of preservationists, of civic activists who got together, and this is a banner that they hung during Mardi Gras. They capitalized on the national media that would be in town for it, and their effort to, as it says, stop the elevated Riverfront Expressway. Led by that charge, Bill Bora and Dick Baumbach, who were two young attorneys who got
yeah.
into the fight. They weren't the only ones by any means, and they became a public face of it. But
Right.
Martha Robinson, Ray Woodrow,
Jacob and
Glenn
Mary
Wilson,
Morrison.
the Morrisons. So a lot of names that we've heard over the years that were really
Who were real
involved.
activists for the preservation of the French Quarter, and when they heard wind of this project,
Right.
they got busy.
They had been fighting it for years, and it was an idea that had been around for years. It was in the 40s. Robert Moses was a national urban planner and transportation planner and came up with the plan. And it wasn't just here. Of course, cities across the country were doing it, and it was sort of that modernization, the Houstonization, and there's a term that was coined.
But Moses was essential because he had this whole vision that the city of the future wouldn't rely on public transit. It would rely on automobiles and freeways. And so
Right.
that was his vision. And he had it with a vengeance in New York City. I mean,
True.
so much of New York City, if you've been in New York and if you look along the East River, the expressway that runs into town, and with those high-rise public housing, it's all Robert Moses' vision.
But it wasn't to be here.
Right. One part of the thinking, too, was that it would bring people into the city. Well, of course, it would do the opposite. It would be the flight to the
Yeah.
suburbs. It would have given you an easier way out of the city as well. So that was flawed. But the other big part of this was the federal government would have paid 90% of the cost. So what city government isn't going to think that's a great thing? Let's go for that. I put down a list here from the story that I did of who was for it and who was against it. So when you hear who was for it, the mayor, Mayor Vic Skiro, the city council, which is future Mayor Moon Landrieu, who would be elected in 1969, the Chamber of Commerce, BGR, the business groups, the Times-Picayune, and WWL-TV. Two big voices in media. So that's the four. The against is pretty short, other than, as I mentioned, the activists and the preservationists. WDSU is a key part of that. The Stearns, Edgar Stern, not only in editorials and coverage against it, taking a stance against it, but also in funding Laura and Baumbach and sending them to other cities to look at things. And the Stern Family Fund helped to provide the funding for that. Clarion Herald, which was a small paper of the Archdiocese, and the Vieux-Carré Courier, which is a French Quarter newspaper. So important, but when you look at how lopsided that fight was. And so finally, July 1st, 1969 is the anniversary that would be this month. Robert Volpe, who was President Nixon's transportation secretary, I guess, and we were talking earlier, like, how does that happen? How did they cave? I think, and maybe you can weigh in on this, Earl, that it was that outcry, that outpouring of
I think he was starting to get reaction to
negative
this
publicity
around the country, because this was the era when freeways were being built, and there were some people saying, or interstates, and say, oh no. But the interesting thing is that Volpe had been governor of Massachusetts, and so in the years ahead, Boston would be facing those same type of issues. So it was actually under the Nixon administration, which you'd identify as conservative, pro-business, that the call came from Volpe. No, we're not going to do it.
But the project wasn't 100% canceled because we had the Claiborne Avenue.
Right, which is a common misconception that those who were victorious in this fight always are careful to point out that it wasn't a result of this dying and so let's do Claiborne Avenue. They were parallel tracks that were both happening at the same time. The opposition wasn't there in that neighborhood in Treme, for obvious reasons, I guess you could say, and so it didn't.
Because that
so
had
it
been
went
a
through.
beautiful tree-lined avenue
Well, the
before
thing is, you still needed some sort of fast route someplace into the city. And so if not Claiborne, it would have been Galvez, it would have been Broad Street. And wherever you'd gone, it would have probably been an old neighborhood, because the old neighborhoods would have been outside
It's
the
probably
central
a
city.
no-win.
And so it was bound for political
But
sensitivity.
to think and look at that picture of the French Quarter, just when you realize
Right, to
what that
think
would have
what
done,
could have
how
been.
terrible it could have
That's
been.
a
And also-
shocking picture. And let me tell you, it makes me wonder, did that strengthen the preservationist community and the preservationist groups? Because imagine anything that would encroach on the French Quarter today would be blown out of the water immediately.
Well, they certainly won a big battle. I mean, and as Dominic said, the preservationists had been active for
Decades,
way before this came up. So I would guess it did bolster them and their movement
as I
also
say,
for preservation around the
There
city.
were more fights to come, as you say.
Right.
This was the first victory of
A big victory.
An
It really-
example I suggest that people here can relate to is, like, if you go into the Gulf Coast, Mobile, okay, that the interstate cuts right through Old Town Mobile. I mean, part of the Old Towns, which barely exists on one side, and part is on the other side. And so
Well, we have to move on now, but I mean, it's really another. As a matter of fact, Bill and Richard
Baumbach.
called it the Second Battle of New Orleans. That was the name of their book, The Second Battle of New Orleans, and it really was. Okay, Dom, great, thanks a lot. All right, Mike, we're going to go back over to you. And 4 police officers lost their jobs, 2 suspended because they violated the department policy of police chases, car chases, and which, in one instance, 2 young people died who they were chasing in allegedly a stolen car, and then a patron in the building that they ran into also died.
Yeah, it was just a horrific accident in which, during a chase, 2 juveniles who were in a stolen car flipped. They hit the Unity One beauty salon, sparked a fire in which one of the patrons there, a 54-year-old woman, died also. And now the repercussions from that, as you said, 4 officers fired, 2 suspended. And it's known as the pursuit policy. In New Orleans, under the consent decree, which was adopted in 2012, there are strict rules and very narrow exceptions to that, in which you can actually go on an active pursuit, because it does put innocent citizens and property at risk. In New Orleans, that rule is, the pursuit policy is stricter than other parishes like Jefferson, and stricter than state police. So it does kind of lead to, in some cases, what seems like a contradiction, but the state police in the boundaries of Orleans Parish can pursue much more readily than New Orleans police, who are bound by the consent decree.
So in this case, their dash cams were off, right?
And in this instance, they would have been turned off. As soon as you flip lights and sirens, those dash cams go on automatically. And the fact that They were turned off. There were three two-person cars all engaged in this, and four of the officers in the two cars continued the pursuit to the extent that they got fired, and a third car with two officers broke it off, but nevertheless engaged in what would have been other activities that led to, quite a damning case against them, which included they had been involved in previous pursuits in which they turned off their dash cams. The previous ones didn't result in any injuries, so they went under the radar, but this was obviously a tragedy. And the officers initially gave false accounts of what had happened, though the falsity of those accounts was uncovered through witnesses who saw the pursuit, as well as some security video cameras along that route. So
there has been some criticism of the superintendent for taking such harsh action and firing these officers, but he stands by it.
Well, yes, and obviously this was, I guess, maybe the first major disciplinary action under the new police chief, Sean Ferguson. He wanted to, put a very bright line in the sand about, violating a major policy, number one, but the damage from it was enormous. Now, with these firings, there is almost 100% we're going to see appeals by some, if not all, of the officers. They are covered by civil service, so we could very well hear, further accounts. Perhaps some of the four officers might be differently positioned, say the driver versus the passenger in those vehicles, who flipped off the dash cam, among two officers in a car. Okay. So I do think that we'll probably see some more details, but certainly a very, very strong position by the police chief.
A strong response.
So
all right, Mike, we're going to have to move on right now. Thanks a lot, Mike. Don, over to you now for Future Watch. And the airport, the airport, is it going to be open this year?
Well, so they say. We'll see. It was supposed to be open, as we all know, May 15th, and they pushed that back to the fall. When I asked if they could quantify the fall, we all talked before the show. The fall to us is September 21st to December 21st. I said early fall, late fall, when in fall, actual fall? I couldn't get any clarification on that. What they're waiting for is for the general contractor, the airlines, the concessionaires, TSA, all to say they're ready. So what happened earlier in May is, for the first 90% of the construction of that new billion-dollar building, there's really one general contractor who's handling everything. Then as all the individual groups, the concessionaires come in, the airlines come in, they all have their own specifications, their own contractors, and the coordination of that just didn't happen as quickly as it maybe should have or could have. We do know when it does open, if it is in the fall like they say, that the switchover will happen between a Tuesday and a Wednesday. That's the slowest time at New Orleans Airport for plane flights, and they literally will have to shut down operations in the old and turn up operations in the new in a matter of hours overnight. It is on track for the fall. Construction's underway and coming along. Several of the concession spaces are complete or nearing completion with their signage up, their equipment in the baggage claim area where they'll have a stage for performances to greet people. They have plants already in place, live green plants, not fake plants. So I saw some images today. It really is coming along and looks like it's ready to go. It's just they have to have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed to be able to open. The roadway leading there off of Loyola, that changed configuration, is ready. It's striped. There's signage up on it. The parking lots are just about done. The existing long-term garage will become an economy garage with a shuttle that gets people there. The existing off-site parking facilities like Park and Fly and US Park, if you're familiar with those on Airline Highway, they will still be operational. You just have a slightly longer shuttle ride than you once did. The new parking is done. The public, I'm told, will have advance notice for when it will be, but right now there's no date.
And the old terminal?
The old terminal, no plan for that yet, for how it will be used. Also, the flyover ramps, the actual exits from I-10 to the airport, they're not anywhere close the contract isn't out yet. They're probably 4 years from now.
But that airport access road.
The airport access road off of Loyola and Veterans is done and complete. There used to be a fire station that stood in the middle of that neutral ground, if everybody remembers. That fire station's been removed. There are 2 new turning lanes.
And then the road from Airline that led up to Veterans, is that going to remain open too?
No, you will have to go Loyola Veterans
So the
into the
existing
airport.
access
The
road
existing
will-
access road. The existing access road you would have to come out of, turn onto Veterans, and then turn left onto Loyola to get
Okay.
into the airport.
Yeah, okay. All right, Don, thanks a lot. Errol, over to you on Rampart Street. That has some really historic buildings in relation to jazz. Some
There's a
action
famous
there.
little newspaper clipping from January of 1914 that reports on juvenile crime on New Year's Eve. And it reports that 5 boys were arrested on Canal Street just for being rowdy and 1 was drunk. And then it reports on another boy who was arrested on South Rampart in Perdido, and they identify him as 12-year-old Louis Armstrong. And this is a famous story, of course, that Armstrong apparently had a record, but I mean the police were aware of him at that time, and they sent him to what was then known as the Colored Waifs Home. And who would know the impact this would have on the country's musical legacy, because it was there that he learned to play the cornet and everything else that evolved from there. But that neighborhood around Rampart and in Perdido was Armstrong's world. He lived nearby. This is pretty much the area around where City Hall is now. And his home was almost across the street from where City Hall is now. And so he lived, and there was a tailor, a guy named Kornofsky. And Louis Armstrong would go and supposedly work for Kornofsky for a while. And supposedly it was Kornofsky who gave him his own cornet. And so he played the music, but there were saloons and bars. There was a place called the Iroquois Theater where they'd have music. There was another thing. There was the Little Jim Cafe, and there was the Eagle Saloon. Anyway, there were those places. All the places I mentioned, the buildings still exist now. They're not being used for anything. But it's been a dream of many people. Man, if only we could revive this area. What a historic area. And if you know, when you go down, you see that the Holiday Inn that has the big clarinet on the side. Well, that's almost like the epicenter of that area. Well, the Bazan family several years ago bought the Little Jim Cafe, and as a labor of love, they've had a cafe and they've had music there, and they've done a good job. But there's nothing else in the neighborhood that's going to really draw a lot of people there. So a company out of Cleveland called the GBX Group bought the Little Jim Cafe. They said they're going to maintain the musical purpose of the thing. They own the other buildings too, except for the Eagle Saloon. The preservationist group owns that. And they haven't said, we're going to go and do this and do great things, but the potential is there. If this company has deep pockets to go and develop these places. And look how the area, the neighborhood's been derelict for a long time. But look what's happening now with that South Market that's developing not far from there. And in the direction from the Dome, you're seeing more and more of a sports entertainment district. So you're seeing more things that A, have people living in the neighborhood, and B, have people getting entertainment in the neighborhood. So if it could all converge into what could be a new district and bring back South Rampart what it was.
So it remains to be seen what actually will happen with these buildings.
Right now it's just dreaming, but it's good to see out of town money. There was the jazz tune, South Rampart Parade, and people hear that, and I wonder about tourists if they come to New Orleans, say, "Man, I got to see South Rampart, see what it is." They must be disappointed. And I know they come here a lot, and they want to see the spot where jazz was created. And that spot doesn't exactly exist, but there are places where it evolved.
It grew. Yeah, right.
And by the way, the term jazz didn't really originate until around 1919. And so even when guys like Buddy Bolden and Little Louis Armstrong were playing it, they didn't know it was jazz that they were playing for a while. But it was an evolving music.
Their new music. Okay, Eve, thanks a lot. Very interesting. Okay, we're going to wrap up with you, Mike. This is regarding traffic lights and the city and a contract that, well, we're just wondering what's happening with that.
Yeah, an oddball story involving city government. It might have been noticeable to some people when their traffic lights were out for days and a couple instances, weeks at a time, because of a dispute that the city had with a contractor, a company named Jack B. Harper, Baton Rouge Electrical Company that fixed traffic signals. And they've been under contract since 2017, but the city, in its wisdom, thought, let's line up a second contractor. It came about during a dispute over Jack B. Harper not getting paid, or at least the city being behind on invoices by many months, several $100,000. And Jackie Harper blew the whistle on that, saying, hey, you have a contract with us, and you can't just line up a second contractor to do the same thing. And especially since Jackie Harper just got their contract renewed until June 2020. But the city went and did that anyway. And here's where they got into some legal difficulty. It started with a cease and desist letter from Jackie Harper. The city ignored that. Jackie Harper went to court. They got a temporary restraining order from a judge, and the city continued on and opened bids. And one of those bids, there was only one bidder, but it was 4 times the cost of the existing Jackie Harper contract. And now the city is in court, still fighting with Jackie Harper, arguing why it's in its right to have a second contractor, despite the bid coming in at 4 times
Facing contempt
higher.
charges now, too.
Right, and so Jackie Harper's response to that was, you violated a TRO, so they filed a contempt motion. So the city is possibly going to have to answer to a contempt
So this
charge.
whole issue now is in the courts. But meanwhile, the bottom line, who fixes the traffic lights when?
Well, Jackie
they go
Harper's still under contract, doing the work. It sounds like there's a payment plan for them to get paid, but the city is oddly still in court arguing that it has this right to line up a second contractor despite the price.
And Harper's still in a contract until next year, through
until
next year.
June 2020.
Okie doke. All right, Mike. It is time now to look ahead.
Okay, the state elections, in which we elect a governor and legislators in some municipal offices, is October 22nd. Week after next, though, qualifying begins. It's August 6th through 8th.
Amazing. Mike.
You may have seen in the national news the resumption of federal executions, and one of the people on federal death row, I think there are only 39 total, but is Len Davis, from the notorious and infamous case in which Len Davis, NOPD officer, ordered the execution of a woman, Kim Groves, and has been on federal death row ever since.
Really?
He's close to the end of his appeals, but if they do in fact resume federal executions, his turn would come up.
And there is a Louisiana man who was on that list, right?
Louisiana
For federal-
man in a Texas killing, but yes, had some Louisiana ties there too.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Don.
We're talking about that area around Rampart Street. Nearby at the Pythian Market, Willie Mae's Scotch House is getting another location at the Pythian Market downtown that's opening in mid-August. So
Okey-doke.
that's more revitalization in that area.
Yeah, really, really important.
I have a prop. We mentioned earlier
You
the
do,
book.
yeah.
The book, The Second Battle of New Orleans by Bill Bohr and Dick Baumbach, is being reissued. It's a wonderful
Is it?
history, and it's being reissued this year, is the goal, by some friends. And Jed Horn, formerly of The Lens and the Times-Picayune, he is writing a new introduction to it. So they'll keep the text intact, which certainly lays out their fight, but it's a good read. It's out of print, so it's hard to get, hard to find.
and,
but-
it is out of print right
Yes,
now?
out of print.
Yeah, it is
But it's in the
really a good
library,
read.
so
I
if
mean,
you
I,
wanna
I
Yes.
can remember reading that in urban studies classes at UNO, and it really is a significant battle, and we're certainly glad the way that it ultimately ended up. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Interesting conversation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for joining us, and of course, we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.